Hey guys, thanks for coming and thanks for having me here. Today I'll talk a little tiny bit about myself and hopefully a little bit more about the company that we started a few years ago, and maybe a few kind of anecdotes and learnings from this journey. As you guys probably know by now, my name is Kevin. I'm one of the co-founders of GO-JEK, and in these years that I've been with the company, I've held many hats. When we first started, I was CFO, but even though I was CFO, I was handling things like online marketing. I used to upload personally our online marketing content onto Facebook, copying and pasting different copy, editing images. I did all of that. I helped build our business intelligence and analytics team. I helped build our data science team. And kind of today, I manage probably, I guess the easiest way to say it is I manage GOJEK's core business, which is still moving people around. But then we can get into it later. Today, GOJEK's vision extends far beyond on-demand transportation and food delivery and sending all kinds of different things around Indonesia, but also doing things like on-demand wallets, financial services soon, B2B businesses with leading e-commerce sites, and soon all kinds of other things that we want to do in Indonesia. So all of those different things. Today, I'm primarily responsible for what's still our core business, which is moving people and things around. So GOJEK actually started in 2010 as a call center. It wasn't a technology company, and it was founded on a realization. Actually, how many people here are aware of what an OJEK is? Oh, wow, that's really surprising. For those of you guys who don't know what an OJEK is a gray market taxi on motorcycles in Indonesia. Gray market because it's not illegal, but it's also not legal. There's no kind of legal structure around these folks who used to kind of hang out under a tree, next to a bridge, waiting for passengers. And the realization was that during this time when they were hanging around trees or under bridges, was that these guys were actually very hardworking. They were very honest, but they weren't very productive. And they weren't very productive because of a combination of things, primarily around the way that they worked, which was they could only depend on foot traffic, people walking by. And for those of you who've been to Indonesia, there's not a lot of foot traffic because there's not a lot of sidewalks. There's not a lot of public transportation. So foot traffic is scarce. Then you also have the problem that they have a queuing system. So if all of us here were part of an OJEK base next to some tree or a bridge, if I got some guy who walked past and we negotiated a price and we kind of went off on some trip, and I came back and there was no other passengers that walked past, but I'm already back here, the next passenger that would potentially walk past our group, I would not be able to pick up until every single person in this room got a passenger, right? So as a result, these guys were officially working like 6 to 10-hour days, but only doing like 2 to 3 rides a day because of this very inefficient system. So we realized that, hey, Indonesia is full of gridlock cities. Traffic is awful, infrastructure is awful, getting around is awful, getting things around is awful, and yet you have all these people all around these Indonesian cities who are also not being very productive. So it's kind of like it was almost like a perfect marketplace problem where you had an overabundance of supply that wasn't being used, and you had actually a lot of latent demand that just wasn't being communicated. So 2010, we started a call center. How it would work was you would call the call center and you would say, hey, I'm looking for a pickup. This is my pickup point. And one of our call center agents would then put the phone down, write it, input it into our VBA system at the time. And what they would do is we would have a database of all the OJEK drivers on our platform, and we kind of write down a note of where these guys usually hang out. So literally, we was like, hey, these guys usually hang out in these areas. We have no idea where they actually are at that given moment, but we know they usually hang out in these areas, and we would just call them. We would call them and say, hey, you have an order to do this. This is how much the price is. Would you like to take it? And so This is obviously very slow, and the user experience tends to be quite terrible because you would have to wait sometimes 20, 30 minutes to even get a confirmation whether you got a driver. And sometimes the confirmation is, hey, sorry for waiting 30 minutes, we couldn't find you a driver. So that's why the company had difficulty scaling until 2015. So in 2015, in January 2014, we raised our Series A. We raised a small sum of money, relatively speaking, of $2 million. Recapitalized the company, reformed the management team, and basically launched the app 6 months later. So we launched the app January 2015. So when people say, GOJEK's a 7-year-old company, I actually beg to differ. I think GOJEK, as we know it today, is actually only a 3-year-old company because the app launched January 2015. And GOJEK, as we know it today, is an app. So we launched in January 2015 with 3 different services. Those services was Ride, get a ride. There was Send, send something, a package, or Shop, buy something. Get a driver to go somewhere, buy something, and bring it somewhere. So that was what we launched with, and what we noticed quickly is that we've accidentally built an on-demand platform. Like we didn't think about it as a platform at the time. I mean, now there are articles written about us as the super app, or there's articles written about us this kind of like a platform for on-demand services. We didn't kind of think about it that way in reality, and this is kind of another learning where I think oftentimes when you read in the media about some brilliant strategic masterstroke, some innovative new business model that these guys really smartly came up with, in reality a lot of times it's just an accident. It's true. It was an accident. And it was an accident because at the time, the way we were thinking about it was that a guy on a motorcycle can do many things. This person can take a person around, they can buy something, they can send packages. As long as you trusted this person, that as long as he or she was paid fairly, they would do a good job. And so because of that, we just allowed all these different services to be done on the same supply base. Which is that motorcycle driver. And so we accidentally created an on-demand platform. And then we just kind of expanded very organically. For example, we realized that 80 to 90% of the things being bought in our shopping service was actually food. So majority of the things that were being bought was food. And how our shop service worked was you would just set a pickup, and then you would choose, hey, buy me noodles here, buy me whatever. And most of them were food, so we launched Go Food, which is now kind of one of our flagship products. So as you can see, 2016, we did a bunch of new things, and we'll get into that later. So in 3 short years, we've managed to accomplish quite a bit. To give you a sense of how quickly we've scaled, when we launched our app in January 2015, I think we did probably something like 4,000 to 5,000 completed orders that month, which is decent for any early stage company. But then by now, 3 years later, we're doing just around 100 million completed orders per month. So we went from 5,000 to about 100 million per month in 3 years. We went from about 500 registered drivers at the time to today about 1.2 million registered drivers all across Indonesia. And all of this happened pretty fortuitously, to be honest. So just to give you a sense of scale, we have 70 million downloads, probably a bit more by now. About 40% of all Android devices in Indonesia have our app, and about 80% of all iOS devices in Indonesia have our app. So we cover a very good chunk of the Indonesian footprint. These are nice fun facts. We cover a lot of distance. GoPay, which we launched in January 2016, is Indonesia's largest online wallet, bigger than all the banks and telcos already. After, a year and a half. GoFood actually is the largest food delivery company in Asia outside of China, which is really cool. The cool part, the especially cool part about it is that 85, almost 90% of all of the restaurant partners we have are not big name merchants, right? They're not your chains. They're not the McDonald's, Domino's, Pizza Hut, Bakmi Gajah Mada for you guys who are Indonesian. 85 to 90% of them are actually small mom and pop restaurants. Which is part of the coolest things about what we do, which is we're actually empowering a lot of these micro entrepreneurs who previously didn't have access to distribution, didn't have access to marketing, didn't have access to this wealth of customers, even though their product is amazing. Our top merchant is a small lady who sells like Indonesian desserts. and she sells about $100,000 USD worth of these snacks per month, right? And she's just some lady who's been making snacks for since a few decades ago. And because of platforms like us, she now has reach, she now has distribution, and she's been catapulted into like the top 1% of Indonesian society, which is cool. And she deserves it because she makes delicious snacks, right? And it's just because of that distribution and that lack of access that people like this lady, were denied the opportunity of becoming a millionaire. So this is one of the coolest things about what we do, which is because it's Indonesia, because so many things are broken, we actually discover that there's so much opportunity that's untapped. And today, we're processing about $5 billion worth of transaction value annually. And the amount that we take from our partners is roughly in the range, depending on the type of business, depending on the city, depending on very many things, but in the range of 10 to 30%. That's our take, right? Which means that 70 to 90% of that $5 billion actually goes to all of these members of our platform that are traditionally the most ignored by society. It's the small mom and pop restaurants. It's just the guy who has a motorcycle sitting under a tree, who previously was earning significantly less than minimum wage, worrying about just how can he put a roof over his family's head, to now worrying about how can I pay for my kids' college education. Right? So these stories are kind of abundant in Indonesia, and it's really cool to kind of be part of that. It's a bit of a sexy image we like to show. It's for people who are probably familiar with Indonesia, if you can see, this is actually a map of Jakarta. It looks like Jakarta. It's like a bunch of lights showing Jakarta. And actually, it is Jakarta. And every single dot here represents a pickup or drop-off within Jakarta. So no map. It's just a black canvas where we put in lat longs of where pickup and drop-offs are happening. And you can see throughout the day where all of the activity in Jakarta is happening just by looking at the data on our platform, which is super cool. So you can see in the middle, it's the most intense during the middle of the day because this is where the heart of Jakarta is. So yeah, super cool. So this is just another view. We have more than 70 million downloads. We have 125,000 restaurant partners, over 50 cities in Indonesia, more than 1 million drivers on the platform. And this part, I think this part we don't talk about enough. We don't talk enough about all the families that indirectly or directly we're providing income to. All the restaurant partners, all the drivers, they're supporting their families, and families that will one day form the future of our country. And I think that part is really cool. I think because when you look at a market like let's say the U.S., when you look at a company like Uber, they are definitely enabling amazing things. But the step change in terms of somebody who previously did something else and is now an Uber driver, from before and after, when you compare to somebody who's been successful on our platform, is night and day. It's the difference. It's not the difference between kind of having a little bit more extra money to go out or a little bit extra money to make some payment, like in the U.S. It actually is. It means going from lower class to middle class. It means a whole reorientation of your priorities from survival to the future of the next generation. So having these stories is truly amazing. And we've done this by doing things what we believe is the right way. And we started in many ways, as the small company. So it's very weird actually for us right now, because for the longest time until this last funding round, to be honest, all we were focusing around is just to not die. It really was. Until, yes, believe it or not, even after raising $1 billion before this round, because in total we've raised about $2.5 billion. So previously we already raised close to around $1 billion, but even then we were still focused to not die, right? Because we have competition, regional competition that I'm sure some of you guys, probably you guys use their service here. But at the time, when regional competition came in, we've only raised like $18 million at the time. They came in having raised like I think $300 million. And we came in 18 million versus 300 million in 2016. 2015. And we had to engage in a price war with 20 times less money. So for the first kind of 2.5 years of our existence, all our focus was just around not dying. And so now with the latest round, we've managed to get to a place where, okay, now capital is no longer a concern. We can no longer be crushed with money. Now what does the path forward look like? And that's kind of, there are many kind of views of internally on what that looks like. But it's truly an exciting time, to be part of this company, to be part of this story, because now we just need to chart the future for us. And I guess it's a little arrogant to say this, maybe, but it's also, helping chart, the future of the country, because we do have, 2 million families, and we're growing very quickly. So I was thinking, like, I could share like a ton of learnings and journeys and anecdotes actually, but I think I will go straight into Q&A. Probably better use of everyone's time. Yeah.
My name is Tan Eng Teck. I'm a fresh graduate from SMU, and currently I'm working as a project coordinator. I have read quite a lot of stories about startups that don't survive, and your story is particularly inspirational because you had huge regional players that were coming in to try and crush you with a lot of capital. How do you and your team, how do you personally as a leader hold the space and hold the leadership necessary to go through that? What are some stories that you have to share with us?
There was a particularly dark moment in this part of the story, and I think it happened around 2015. Around 2015, so one thing that we did, I think we were a little bit crazy in that we decided to engage directly in this price war, right? So there is, I think the learning there is, even though we had 20 times less money, we did try and go toe-to-toe in pricing. And in many would say that's pretty stupid, and probably was. But I think we kind of had that attitude where, look, losing was not an option. And if we were going to lose, we would lose in a blaze of glory. But I don't know. I don't know if that's a good lesson to teach. But I think as in the industry that we're in the ride-hailing is one of the most cutthroat industries in the world. You just kind of have to have that attitude. And there was one particularly dark moment in 2015 when we were deep in that subsidy war with 20 times less money, where we basically had a few days of cash left, where literally I had more money in my personal bank account than the company had money. And there was this one moment when I was kind of looking at, I was sitting in our office and I was just looking at like everyone sitting there, and it was like, wow, like if we mess this up, all these people here are not going to get paid. They're not going to get paid. They've entrusted us with their future. They've entrusted us with their livelihood, and we're going to fail them. And I think that was both a dark and also at the same time kind of empowering moment when you kind of realize that, okay, it's not just about us as the founders. It's not just about me, about like my personal failures. I think you need to drive motivation from a lot of these kind of not external exactly, but more like the people that you've kind of built this company with, your employees, your drivers, your investors, and you kind of really have to drive a lot of, I guess, strength from the idea that, hey, you're kind of, it's not just about you, like you can't fail all these people. And I think it's that sense of responsibility that kind of like helps, push through some of those dark times, because, I might be stressed, but, there are all these people whose lives like really depend on us succeeding. So I think that was another kind of way that we kind of persevered. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Alicia. I'm a freshman in SMU. So I understand that 2018 be the year of GoPay, and you guys just acquired 3 new fintech companies. So I'm interested to know, what obstacles do you foresee going forward in increasing the adoption of GoPay across online and offline establishments? Thank you.
Well, one issue is obviously regulatory. This whole revolution of what's happening in many parts of the world, mostly driven by China and like QR payments, mobile wallets, is fairly new. And so I think in any kind of new technology that clashes against incumbents, there's always kind of regulatory pushback. So I think one area is, one challenge is how do we work together with the incumbents? How do we form partnerships to show that, hey, we're not here necessarily to crush everyone. We're here to actually uplift the ecosystem, empower all the partners within the ecosystem. And so I think that's one challenge that we have to deal with in terms of regulatory bodies to kind of change their perspective on that. And obviously, when it comes to always changing behaviors, it's always a challenge, right? Most people in Indonesia still transact using cash. So how do you change that behavior to move to a cashless ecosystem is also another challenge, and that's kind of what we're trying to do right now by kind of securing more and more use cases. Obviously, our platform already has some of the most high-frequency use cases. We have transportation, we have food, we have mobile top-ups, we have groceries, we have movie tickets. So all of these things are high-frequency use cases. So we kind of have that as a leg up. But then moving into offline, how do we convince folks to kind of change their behavior on going from just using our wallet on our platform to going offline, and like what are the kind of different use cases that are most compelling to people to switch from cash? I think is the challenge that we are trying to answer right now. Yeah.
All right. Hi, my name is Kenneth. I'm a student from the Masters of Management program. And I just wanted to ask you, during the early stages, before the emergence of GOJEK, when you were brainstorming with your friends, did you have any other startup ideas that you had that you wanted to reinforce or execute? Or was GOJEK your very first idea right away?
So the first company I started was actually an online dating site. Yeah, so I started an online dating site. That was I would say, moderate success. We got acquired by Lunch Actually. So I'm a shareholder in Lunch Actually now. No, I mean, I think for me, I've never, GOJEK is the largest company I've ever been a part of. And I've really, I've never worked in any large companies. I was not a very good employee. I was a mediocre student. So I think, for me, it's always been, this has always been the path. And yeah, and you always kind of brainstorm and you have all kinds of crazy ideas. But I think it's important to find those group of people that you can trust, both in terms of just a personal level of trust, but also trust in terms of competency, right? I think that's a very hard combination to get, where oftentimes the people that you trust the most from a personal level might not be people you want to work with. And that's kind of like a reality. I think many people kind of conflate the two, where, hey, I really like you as a person, but the list of people that I really like as friends, but I would never work with, is fairly long, to be honest. So I think it's important to kind of separate those two when you look for people to potentially start a company with.
And just the second question is, like, what advice do you want to give to other people who want to create a startup but are very close to giving up right now?
Ooh. Wait, giving up before starting?
No, they already started, but they're in the
Okay.
process of failing.
Then fail, move on. That's okay. Accept the fact, like most startups fail. And it's not nice. But accept that as a fact of life and move on. It's like being rejected in dating. It's like not getting into the school you want to get into. Life's hard. People fail all the time, and I think usually the secret to kind of solving all of those problems I just mentioned is just to keep trying. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, a follow-up to that question is, so people say that GOJEK suddenly came out of nowhere and became such a big success in Indonesia, but, and I'm sorry if you shared this earlier, but I came late. But what people didn't know that you guys actually started way 7 to 10 years ago. And during that period, how do you guys how are you guys patient enough to wait? How are you guys, because there's so much uncertainty, there's so much that you guys have to go through. How do you know to stay put and not quit? I guess that's something that's related to his question. How do you know whether you should continue working towards your idea, or when do you know you should give up and move on?
Well, actually, for GOJEK, the situation was probably a little, again, fortuitous. There's a lot of these lucky coincidences, and the fortuitous part of it was the fact that GOJEK started as for a lot of the the original batch of folks who started it, it was everyone's side project. Everyone kind of had separate jobs. So it just kind of broke even and just floated along with no one really kind of devoting, real management time around it at the co-founder and founder levels. So everyone kind of had separate jobs, and it just kind of fortuitously did not die. Again, there's a lot of these very, very lucky coincidences, and this is one of them. That for the first 3.5 years of its life, it broke even. I mean, people had to chip in some capital to keep it afloat every now and then, but it kind of just ran itself with a skeleton management crew, and thankfully it remained, and the timing was right in terms of us jumping in full time. The timing was right in terms of investor appetite. The timing was right in terms of mobile penetration. The timing was right in terms of this whole interest in investing in Uber-like businesses. There's just many, many things that kind of lined up perfectly to kind of for that to happen. And so the earlier question around failure, most companies don't have aren't as lucky. And so there were many, many times in our history where we could have failed and this would have never happened.
In terms of technology, that couple of years going forward, is it because of some people in your team that's the technology? What kind of technology you're deploying at the time? Is it technology?
Well, at that time there was no technology. It was literally a VBA macro to input orders with some light integration with Google Maps. So there was no technology at the time. But then now, obviously, and this is as far as my knowledge goes because I'm not a technical co-founder, but we use some pretty cutting-edge stuff in terms of real-time data streaming. We have an office here in Singapore that focuses on data science, stuff like developing machine learning algorithms, creating prediction models, stuff like that. And most of our architecture is being written in pretty advanced, with pretty advanced technology because just the scale is immense. I think internally we have about 300 million API calls per second. So we have like about 400 different internal microservices, all these different services that talk to each other. And if you look at how many of these requests happen per second, they're at around 300 million per second. So we have some pretty heavy duty technology happening. And that's as far as I can.
None of your team are technology people?
Huh?
None of your team members are technology people?
Out of the original co-founder group, no. So again, very lucky. But so Sequoia invested in us in May 2015, just as we were scaling. And they introduced us to two companies based out of Bangalore in India. And they basically rewrote our backend. These companies basically focus on helping Sequoia portfolio companies scale. And we got along so well with the founders of these two companies that we just decided to acquire them. So now, so now, in fact, I just landed from Bangalore this morning actually, because we were out there with the tech team. So yeah, I'm in Bangalore every month and a half now.
Hi, my name is Jiamin. I'm actually a final year student studying analytics. So following up from what you just mentioned about data science, you mentioned that you actually handpicked maybe your data science team. So I was actually interested in finding out how you actually realized that analytics was actually core to the business, or how you used analytics to optimize your business. Any applications for us?
So I think before this, I used to work at Zalora at Rocket Internet, and my title was head of business intelligence. So I've always kind of had I would say an obsession with kind of measuring things and optimizing. I think one of the skill sets that I think going forward will be invaluable for any company is really this understanding of how to be data-driven in companies. So I think the ability to kind of obsessively measure and have very clear thinking of what metrics are really representative of the objective you're trying to achieve. So I guess, I don't know if that's good advice, but basically I do think that focusing on this as a skill set will be invaluable because with everything that's being built in terms of technology, there's just so much data being produced, and I think there's actually a dearth a dearth of availability of people who can actually interpret that data. Now, whether or not machines will eventually kind of replace people in interpretation of that data, maybe. But in that case, then we're all kind of screwed. so in that case, then I think probably the best bet is to actually work on software engineering. But that must be depressing for you. So I'm sorry.
Hey, so I'm Brandon. I'm currently an exchange student from Canada. I guess 2 questions that I had. The first one was, how did you determine which investors would be the right fit for your company, and when to actually finance? And then the second question is, a lot of students are going through recruiting, trying to figure out if they want to do internships at these large companies versus actually doing their own thing. Seeing that you have a history of working, the finance field as well as doing some biz dev and business intelligence, what are your thoughts on, building some experience in a bigger company and then going into startups versus jumping straight in?
So investors, I think the biggest, I think the only advice I can give there is, one, I think the brand of the investor is important. It should be probably 30% of the decision making. 70% of it should actually be who is your counterpart on that investment. Who is going to be your board member? Who are you going to deal with most often? And you really want to look for ideally somebody who can really kind of mentor you in the building of the company. One of our board members, so our first 2 investors, one was North Star, a local private equity firm in Indonesia, and the second was Sequoia. North Star, the founder, Patrick himself kind of invested, not personally, but through he was the guy that was sitting on our board. And he was very instrumental in terms of us navigating the Indonesian kind of regulatory space, because we were just kids who didn't really understand what was going on. And then the board member from Sequoia was Shailendra. And Shailendra has invested in many, many, many different companies, and he's one of the top people in Sequoia globally. So he's been invaluable as well in terms of giving us insights as to what do the different stages of a company look like, and what are the kind of common pitfalls. And that somewhat ties into the second question, which is what should you do versus jumping in straight versus kind of getting some experience. I think for most people, the answer is actually it's better to get more experience. I think for most people, you have exceptional talent that I think can just go straight in, and if you have a lot of conviction that that's you, go do it. But if not, I think because I never worked for a big company, and I think one of the learnings I've had over the last year or 2 was that actually a lot of big companies do a lot of things right. They do a lot of things wrong, but they also do a lot of things right. And I think one of the things that I think good big companies do is actually performance management. They do that quite well. So understanding how to set up performance management systems, how to do reviews, how frequently should you do one-on-ones with your direct reports. A lot of the soft skills relating to kind of managing people, I think you would only get in bigger companies. And I think that area is particularly valuable, and I wish I knew it coming in, because before this, the biggest team I've managed was a team of 2. And now, literally, like the 2 people reporting to me had no one downs. It was just 2 people. And now, probably if you look at the one downs of the 7 or 8 people that are my direct reports, they're probably like 400. So that was a hugely steep learning curve I had to learn. So if I could redo it, I would probably find to work at a big company that has great performance management.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
My name is Ilan. I work as a data architect. So I have this question, not necessarily related to GOJEK, and it's more of a question targeting to a founder to get some idea, basically. So I'm working on a product, and I want to give up my job and move in to develop this as a technology startup. So that's a background. And so I work as a data architect, as I said, and I do a lot on data analytics and all that. But with respect to this idea, so I have done quite a bit of market validation, but more than the market validation, what drives me towards it is my passion and my belief, basically, my gut feel. So my question to you is, how much importance that I should give to my gut feel over the real data? So that's my question. And by the way, I already resigned, and I'm moving ahead.
Are you saying the data and your gut feel are telling you conflicting things? Is that the case?
Not necessarily. Actually, the gut feel is the one which is kind of pushing me towards it.
Yeah.
So I have done a bit of market research, but not extensive, I would say.
Yeah.
To take a decision of like quitting your job and moving ahead. Yeah.
Do you have family to support?
Yes.
I almost don't want to give you advice. Okay. If you did not have a family to support, I would say go for it. And the reason is, I think, I know people who would kind of regret not going for it because there will always be this kind of question that's unanswered if you chose like, okay, you know what, I'm going to drop this even though my gut feel says, I should do it. And it'll always kind of eat away at you. It's always those missed opportunities or perceived missed opportunities that kind of eat away at you. So if you didn't have a family, I would say go for it. But because you do, I don't know, man. Like, to be honest with you, it's a hard one, right? Because it's not just about you anymore. Yeah, I'm sorry. I can only give you advice for somebody who has no dependents. Once you have dependents, I think you really have to choose between what's going to be worse for you, the prospect of potentially of having that feeling of missed opportunity eat away at you, or the worry that your life decision could put your dependents into an uncomfortable position. I don't know which one is a greater feeling for you, so you're gonna have to choose between that. Sorry, I can't just say go do it. Yeah, I'm also saying that because I don't want to be guilty of anything. Yes.
Hi, my name is Felicia, and I'm still a student right now. I want to ask you, you mentioned that now is an exciting time for GOJEK, when you guys can worry less about your capital. So how do you guys in GOJEK decide on the direction GOJEK is heading right now? What is the process like? And maybe you can share with us what are the projects you are looking right now, you personally working on.
Sure. Yeah. At this stage, it's actually a harder question of asking what won't we do? You're sitting next to a guy who has a grab pay sticker, and it's very distracting. Anyway, I think the question is, how do we think about what to do next? And I think, we thematically, if you think about what we've been doing, again, unconsciously, is that we try and look for areas where in Indonesia there's a lot of ignored opportunity, right? There's a lot of ignored opportunity at the middle and the bottom of the pyramid, and that could be in all kinds of things, transportation, food, payments, content, groceries, anything. There's a lot of these type of opportunities where, having those network effects, having streamlined payments, and having real scale can kind of solve. And so we're always kind of looking for, what are the big, high frequency needs that are not being met in the kind of the middle to the lower middle part of the pyramid in Indonesia. I think that's kind of the general theme. And I know it means that a lot of things are kind of on the table, and that is actually one of the biggest debates we have right now internally in the company, is because we have a finite amount of management bandwidth, we have a finite amount of engineering bandwidth, and we have a finite amount of time. So the biggest debate internally right now is always kind of like, hey, what do we focus on? What do we not focus on? And to be honest with you, we haven't really solved that, and it's an internal debate that we have all the time. But what I personally I'm involved with today, I'm involved a lot with a lot of our kind of data-heavy teams. Our fraud team, who's being led by somebody in the audience back there, actually, Nicole. I work a lot with our data science team, our business intelligence team, and I primarily am responsible for our core business, like transportation, but I also kind of handle food a little bit as well. But the other stuff, we have other much more capable folk doing. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Stan. I'm also currently working on a startup called Diversity Team. And my question would be to you is, so you guys after the newest round, money is not a problem anymore. What would be the new concern or fear that you're facing now? No fears.
So I think, right now, as a company, there's kind of like, if you take a very corporate finance view, there's kind of two paths, right? We could go public and remain independent and chart our own destiny. Or if we fail, we'll most likely get acquired by some regional company. Let's be real, right? God forbid. So that adds a little bit of security, right? To know that, hey, the worst case scenario is, we end up working for somebody else. Best case scenario, we form, Indonesia's kind of first really transformative technology company in the history of Indonesia. So I think it's both scenarios are not catastrophic. Actually, maybe one of them definitely is catastrophic. But I think one of the fears is actually, to the earlier question, I think one of my fears personally is, we get distracted doing too many things, and we don't focus on really what's important. I think that's one fear. Another fear is, I think there's a lot of hope being placed on us by our millions of driver partners, our hundreds of thousands of restaurant partners, a lot of people within Indonesian various different parts of Indonesian society are rooting for our success. And I think the biggest fear is actually disappointing them and disappointing the people that have kind of joined us as partners or as employees. I think that's probably the biggest fear, that if we don't succeed, we would be disappointing all of these people. And I know that's very fluffy, but because the whole existential threat is kind of not really top of mind, then it's more about fulfilling what we think is our potential. And if we fail to do that, what does that mean for all the people that have been with us for this journey?
Hi, I'm Jonathan, and I'd like to know, with the news about Uber selling their Southeast Asian business to Grab, how does that change the direction of GOJEK in Indonesia and in the Southeast Asian region as well?
Can't share much, but one thing that has been public is we are going international. Right? So it's time.
Hello, my name is Robert. I'm an Indonesian as well. So I've looked at your LinkedIn and I know that you've worked in overseas companies as well as Indonesian companies. So like myself, I've worked in an Indonesian company, the largest flour producer. I will not say the name. You might know who they are. And I've also worked in my family business in Indonesia. So right now I'm still working in Singapore. So the comparing is that when I work in an Indonesian company versus an overseas company, I tend to find that Indonesians are quite lazy. Yeah, so I'm sure you've seen it before, the speed of work and the quality of work that we Indonesians produce. So I just wanted to ask your opinion. How do you handle these differences? Because eventually I want to go back to Indonesia, but so far after working in a few Indonesian companies, I feel like it's just a huge step that I need to take. Yeah.
There is a certain degree of truth in that stereotype, yes. I think, when you compare it to, say, Chinese culture, like mainland China, Chinese culture, that kind of grind and that willingness to kind of succeed at all costs is probably not as strong. But I think what we found is that there are definitely enough Indonesians that if you understand what type of cultural fit you're looking for, if you understand what motivates people, and if you understand how to set up platforms for people to succeed and for people to grow and be excited to contribute, there's enough people to build a company around. Yeah, I know that's not actionable, but it's how we've built the company.
Actually, I mean, if you don't mind a short question, since you put your email up there, right? If eventually anyone here wants to move to GO-JEK, will you entertain that request?
Yeah. That's actually why I put my email there.
All right, thank you so much.
That's the only reason why.
Hello, my name is Andrew, and I'm an entrepreneur as well. Congratulations, and thank you so much for being here, sharing your experience. In your recent round, you had Tencent participate as an investor. Curious to know, how important was what they did with WeChat to becoming a strategic investor, and how you envision that partnership going?
So I think it made it easier for them to understand because I think when you go to a lot of other investors, they're a bit confused sometimes, like, oh, you're doing this, you're doing that, you're doing this, and it's kind of you just end up getting pigeonholed into like, okay, so you're ride-hailing, or oh, you're just food delivery. But because in Tencent, they understand the value of having a platform, so I think that conversation was just a lot easier to have. And to the extent they're helping us today, we are in constant contact with their management, and we are in constant contact with a lot of the companies that they've invested in. And they've invested in, as I'm sure you're aware, in many companies. So the network that it's provided us, and it has been pretty amazing. We've, for example, Meituan, the world's largest food delivery company, is actually also an investor in us, and that connection was made through Tencent. So we have an opportunity to learn a lot about food delivery there. So I think the learnings, we've started, I don't think we've really maximized that opportunity yet, but I think it's something that going forward, we'd really like to leverage more. But at this point, that kind of familiarity makes the conversation easier, and now we're only really starting to kind of try and learn more out of that ecosystem.
Got it. And a follow-up question to that, obviously you probably had the ability to select your investors, right? So was this part of the reason why you guys selected them, apart from the other investors in the round?
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. I think, if you look at what's happening in China right now, a lot of what's happening there in the technology industry is actually very innovative. You have a lot of, going from that stereotype of China just copying U.S. businesses, they've actually leapt ahead in many areas, and the opportunity to kind of learn from that ecosystem is actually one of the reasons why we were super excited to partner with Tencent, because very few other companies in the world have as much understanding of the Chinese ecosystem as Tencent.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yeah.